Hi, this is Pratim Ranjan Bose. You are watching Podcast with Pratim, presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. We will discuss India's recent pact with Iran for long-term operational lease of the Chabahar port. The move is expected to have geopolitical and geoeconomic significance in Central Asia, West Asia, the Caucasian region between the Black Sea and the Caspian, and Africa. I have a very distinguished guest to take this discussion forward. Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, India's former envoy to Jordan, Libya, Malta. Ambassador has long experience of working in West Asia, North Africa, and is considered as one of the finest exponents on the topic. Thank you for joining my show, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bose, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Before I turn up to Ambassador, here is a backgrounder for viewers. Chabahar is located at the Gulf of Oman and is very close to China-operated Gwadar port in Pakistan. It is the first overseas port that Indian government has taken the responsibility to run. India's Adani Group recently acquired Haifa port in Israel. Chabahar was originally designed to offer connectivity to Afghanistan and the India-Iran-Russia initiated International North-South Corridor, or INSTC. The significance of Chabahar increased after India proposed IMEC that will pass through UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan to Haifa in Israel, finally to Europe. USA backed this proposal. Clearly, Chabahar can connect both IMEC and INSTC, both running up to Europe, avoiding the Suez, and can also fuel India Central Asia trade. With that, sir, my first question to you. Sir, Israel-Hamas conflict has created immediate problems for IMEC, but seems to have opened the doors to Chabahar. Is Iran using India as a hedging option against the US sanction, or India is taking a role in playing a peacemaker in the region? Iran enjoys Chinese support, and China played a peacemaker between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Should USA let India-Iran relationship to grow as a counterweight to China? Over to you, sir.
Well, it's a very important question, but since you mentioned about the IMEC, we must understand that connectivity is an extremely important requirement for any kind of a trade or even investments. And a continuity and a safe passages are extremely important. And the countries have always been looking for shorter, smarter routes. And therefore, whether it is IMEC, whether it is INSTC, or other eastern corridors that India has been developing, or for that matter, the Chinese BRI, they are all essentially aimed at connecting for their own advantage and for the basically increasing trade and connectivity. And India, as you know, was connected by land prior to the independence. That was like we could have Afghanistan, Central Asia, which are extremely important from India's point of view. But that physical connectivity are lost. And then we became basically dependent on through Pakistan, or for that matter, Bandar Abbas in Iran. So since 2000, we have seen that India has been working on these projects. I was in Moscow at the time when we signed the INSTC agreement with Iran and Russia, basically trying to connectivity to Europe through this. At that time, we did not have those kind of sanctions that we are seeing today, which have continuously to increase by the US, especially the unilateral sanctions by the United States. So sometimes these are part of the geopolitics and geoeconomics. On the other hand, sometimes they are part of the geopolitical wars that are conducted, what we are witnessing today in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, for that matter. Now, those all have a direct impact on connectivity in one way or the other, because you have to pass through various areas. Now, in this particular case, when we are looking at INSTC, it is sanctions on Russia and Iran. Both are very heavily sanctioned countries by United States. India does not recognize unilateral sanctions. But the private companies, obviously, which have greater exposure in the West, are more concerned about it. And that indicates why many of these have not taken off. Now, this Chabahar port, project has been in the offing since 2002. It was offered to us in 2002 during the visit of President Khatami to India. 2003, we started talking. In 2015, we signed an agreement. And 2016, when Prime Minister Modi went to Iran, at that time, there was this agreement for 10 years was signed. But it could not proceed because in 2018, we had seen President Trump came and he just withdrew from the JCPOA, which is the nuclear agreement, and started imposing greater sanctions on us. With great difficulty, we were able to get waivers for Chabahar port in view of Afghanistan. But by 2021, again, the situation changed because the United States withdrew from there, and therefore it was in no mood to allow any further connectivity with that. But for India, it became extremely important. And its importance, strategic importance, does not go away. We have, firstly, Iran is a very major partner. We were importing about 11 to 12% of our oil from Iran. For our connectivity, Afghanistan, Central Asia, as you mentioned also, is very, very important. So we continue to work on that. Now we started working on the G20, which on the back of G20, we had the signing of agreement between various countries for India, Europe, Middle East Economic Corridor, which was supported by the United States. This is an alternate route. It is not a route which was basically going to replace any, but you need to have many options open. But with the Israel-Hamas war, we are looking at it. This is the situation. Now, China. China is a very major factor in the whole of West Asia, and as far as India is concerned, in every geography. So, China-Pakistan economic corridor, which India does not subscribe to, which has been opposing it because of the sovereignty issues, because of the transparency issues. But they are real problems, real issues. Therefore, it is important that we continue to have a longer-term perspectives as far as these connectivity corridors are concerned. And so they are extremely important strategically and for our trade as India wishes to grow and be a part of the global and value supply chains.
Okay. But what about the US part, sir? Do you think that they should let India develop a deeper relation with Iran? Once upon a time, we used to import a lot of crude from Iran, but we had to cut it down because of the sanctions. So
yes, you are right. Yeah, you are right, absolutely. But, it is the United States considers the world as its chessboard. Let's be very clear about it. But countries like India, which are also emerging powers, we need to look at our own national interest as well. Why should everything be predicated on a country's whims and fancies? If United States considers India as its global comprehensive strategic partner, and a very important partner in its policy towards China, then I think they will need to consider where India is going. They have understood the port's relevance, but just today, because they are no longer that engaged in Afghanistan, it does not mean that they start completely finishing the project altogether or try to, put a nose on it. So I think that we'll have to discuss with them. Of course, the initial reaction of the was in keeping with their policy of that we do have sanctions, we'll impose those sanctions, we'll do them. But then there have to be ways have to be found exactly what to do. Now, knowing it all too well that India has gone ahead and signed this 10-year agreement, which was supposed to be actually part of the 2016 agreement which Prime Minister Modi had signed in Iran. So it is just a culmination of that. It is not something very new, but why it is required? It is required because when you have only 1 year a management contract of a port, then it does not give confidence to the companies to invest because then there is no continuity. Tomorrow, after 11 months, you start either scrambling once again for it. So longer-term connectivity, longer-term management of the project gives you that heft, and which is being seen now in the increasing trade and investment that is taking place. This time, they have already got about $370 million have been arranged for this. So I believe that the IPGL and others, with the companies which are there, once we have the direct service to Chabahar, it will be beneficial for everybody.
Right.
And another thing we need to see, if USA's interest is also to see India as becoming an alternate, credible, reliable, resilient, global and value supply chain integral to it, then it will consider the benefit. Of course, it's not directly benefiting Iran per se, but Iran is a major part of it. And we hope that eventually they'll have to find ways to deal with it.
Right, sir. Sir, I understand the sanction and the problems with the private parties given into consideration. It has been India Port Global, which is a government body. So that is, they have taken the right lease, signed the lease agreement. So it is not a private party, unlike in, say, Haifa, right? So assuming that the sanction remains and the India and Iran are working, now that the port is under 10-year contract to India Port Global, can the projects take off? Like, can we have the connectivity to Afghan border was a major problem in the past. Though India completed the road in Afghanistan in 2009, but this connectivity created the problem in taking goods out of Afghanistan and Tajikistan. It can be extended. And the second problem was there were some local issues also in Chabahar. So can those things be removed, and can we see some solid progress from here on? The port is barely 10% utilized.
Yes, you are right. Absolutely. I mean, so far we have seen that about 2.5 million tons of cargo has gone, and about 90,000 containers, TEUs, have been handled by the port. The reason was that there were not enough cranes, and you mentioned about the private. Now, the private means is that the cranes and other things are basically manufactured by the private companies, right? So when they are doing it, so they were fearful, many of them, because of the secondary sanctions that they might come under, because they also operate in different parts. So that's how it is in board. IPGL is, of course, a special purpose vehicle. And the fact that the government of India has created this special purpose vehicle, which is very clearly indicates that we are very much committed to it. And Iranians, of course, are committed to it. There were problems, no doubt. But then many of these problems have been sorted out in the recent past. During the discussions, there is a trilateral working group, there's a bilateral working group. There is the company that is dealing it. We recently had the visits of the ministers and the technical working groups which are meeting. So obviously the idea is to somehow sort this out as soon as possible, and that will continue to go ahead. I mean, I have no doubt about it, because this is an option for us immediately that we need to start working on.
Okay. Yeah, the US sanction is proving very restrictive on us. I remember Adani won a terminal that was quite a prized thing in Myanmar. And
Yes,
it had to quit it because of these sanctions and all these issues. That was a good breakthrough, but we lost the advantage as a country. So, sir, the next question, the next question is about INSTC and the politics or the geopolitics over it. Now, you have the corridor passes through Azerbaijan and Armenia, and they have a long history of conflicts. Azerbaijan is an ally of Pakistan, and India, Iran, Armenia is a trilateral kind of axis that has come up. So there has been reports about India sending arms or selling arms to Armenia, and probably they will sell more. I mean, I saw that kind of story. How viable is this route?
Well, I think that the INSTC is a much larger project. It has about 13 countries in it, including Armenia and Azerbaijan, and all the Central Asian countries. So it is just INSTC is a project that was envisaged long ago, and about 21 years ago, in order to essentially provide a connectivity through Europe. But then in between, there are several other corridors also, Middle Eastern corridor and others, which India through Azerbaijan. Now, if you come to think of it, Azerbaijan and Armenia are now talking to one another. They are trying to resolve their problems on the basis of some bilateral dialogue. Other countries are working in it. So we hope that that will work out. India is also strategically helping a great deal the Armenians. Iran has closer relations with Armenia. Turkey has much closer relations with Azerbaijan and Pakistan. So you are right, absolutely. I mean, that particular equation is there. But none of these countries are interested in, basically undermining completely their trade. Our trade with Azerbaijan is about $10 billion, whereas with Armenia, it is just about $1 billion. No doubt we have supplied them some the arms ammunition that they needed, which is India is emerging as a major exporter of the arms and ammunition and trying to become far better $5 billion or whatever trade in near future. So we will continue to find markets and continue to provide it to that. At the same time, one has to continue to work on strategic ideas. So I think that they are part of it. They're all discussing these negotiations that they have agreed to it, all these countries. There were internal problems among each country. That is very much there. But that will continue to be part of it, and we'll have to deal it as and when it comes. It is not India specific, it is not Russia specific, it is not Iran specific. These are basically all in one. So therefore, all countries are involved in it. And actually, ironically, the Russia-Ukraine war has given a much greater fillip
Right.
to the INSTC now that we have seen recently.
Right. We saw crude rolling in from Russia.
Yes. Yes. It's working well.
Okay. Only the cost has been an issue. So the cost of doing business through other routes has to move up to make it more viable. That's the
But at the moment also, the distance, right, about it has reduced by 50%.
right.
It used to take about 45 to 60 days. Now it takes about 20, 25 days.
Right.
Of course, there to iron out certain other problems. At the same time, the cost between this, I mean, going via Suez Canal and others, and now with the Houthis attacking there has been a more greater difficulties in that. So this will also be a thing. In fact, you'll be surprised that through the INSTC also, we have seen that a lot of these trade has been passing through, going through the Europe. I mean, it has increased actually more during the recent past from Central Asia and other countries.
Right. Right. So on the same lines, now IMEC Israel Greece connectivity part is at this moment it's not feasible, possible. The truncated part is there. There are two questions. Can the IMEC UAE Saudi Arabia part emerge as a viable alternative to the piracy-ridden Gulf of Aden route? Piracy means high costs, that's all. So whether it can be viable, and then that will also increase traffic to Chabahar. I mean, that will keep on increasing the viability. And secondly, can there be a connectivity to North Africa through Saudi Arabia? I mean, across the sea.
Well, number one is I must say that you mentioned about the problem in the Red Sea and the Hormuz, which is also an Iranian port. Now, the Hormuz, the difficulty there, but Chabahar that way, alleviates that situation because Chabahar will provide you an alternative without going through the Hormuz and the Red Sea Bab el-Mandab and all that. So that is also a good thing from that point of view. That's why one is looking at the INSTC. Then we have seen in the Suez Canal, last year there was one ship that got stuck in Suez Canal, and then all the traffic was completely, jammed. So therefore, alternative routes are extremely important, which is very much a possibility. As far as the current ongoing situation between Israel and Hamas is concerned, that is something one has to be always careful of. Because until and unless we have the Palestinian issue resolved, we will continue to have these kind of disturbances that will happen. Now, the whole thing was, in my view, has been discussed in the I2U2 and various other formats. And it was agreed. And Saudi Arabia, which is also diversifying its economic heft, Saudi UAE also is one of our closest partners. So you imagine, UAE is our third largest trading partner. Saudi Arabia is our fourth largest trading partner. Now, if third, fourth largest trading partners of yours are part of this group, of this IMEC corridor, it makes a great sense. Now, Israel is also a strategic partner, and so is the Greece, which is the endpoint there in Peresport. Now, if this is something that works out, it was not a project that was to happen tomorrow. It will take time because from UAE to Saudi Arabia through the port, then it will obviously railway links have to be created. They are thinking of a GCC railway also now, so which will also connect to the bigger part of it. Now, through Saudi Arabia or Egypt for the matter, what you are looking at is the North Africa part of it is feasible, but it will depend on how viable it will be economically for you. I mean, that is something very important. Mostly the sea routes are preferable, but as you know, the sea routes are beset by various kinds of problems, whether it's piracy or interventions like that of two Houthis, which are unpredictable, and that can create a very major problem. So I think that India is interested in the Mediterranean very much, so, I must say. And therefore, there are discussions going on with several Mediterranean powers exactly how we can work through into the North Africa as well. But right at the moment, I think the bigger issue is how to get going with the connectivity projects of this by avoiding the immediate problems of, let's say, the China-Pakistan economic corridor, as well as the problems that are occurring in the Suez, or for that matter, in the Red Sea and Bab el Mandeb, etc.
In Myanmar, we also built a port called Sitwe. And given the trend that here India has been proactive, it is the first time that you are taking over the control. Can we expect that to happen now in Myanmar, Sitwe, which is very close to that other Chinese port?
Well, I think that that is what is eventually going to happen. We have to do that because, see, we are working on that Eastern corridor as well, and this is very much part of our neighborhood first and Act East policy. There are issues in Myanmar, but India has been working closely with the Myanmar government. But they have their own problems now, which are because of the fight between various groups that is going on, in Myanmar. So we'll have to watch it out. But India is definitely very much keen on this Sitwe port and it's not giving it up. That's what I'm saying. I mean, private companies, that they have their own calculations in this. But I guess that this is same kind of a thing which happened here will happen there as well.
Right. So kind of we have started matching the footsteps of China.
Well, I think that common sense is everywhere, I guess, and the strategic requirements also dictate your decisions. And China is going around in a big way in the BRI and other projects. So, but I don't mind that if something good and strategic is done by somebody else and we can do it in our own Indian way, why not?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
the discussion and enlightening our
Thank you.
audience. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.